there we go. And I was so grateful for the experience of reading it at that time. And it just really put a whole new sense of responsibility on my job that made me feel so much more important to the lives of these kids that I was going to work.
Mm. Oh, thank you for
Yeah.
telling me that.
Well,
That's amazing.
so you don't know, but you and I have had a very long and meaningful relationship already.
This is so stories unite us, right? Stories unite us in a way that, well, I don't know if you follow my Twitter feed. I saw a piece of art this morning that was a wood print made by a Japanese artist of a noodle shop at night. And it's a simple piece of art, but I've probably looked at it 100 times today. And that's the thing about any kind of artistic expression that makes you feel something inside. I think it's actually very healing for us as individuals, but it's also healing for us as communities when we can bond through art.
Oh,
I agree.
amen. I feel like I missed something really important from you there, Abby, but I'm just going to assume it was very profound.
It was deep. It was deep.
It was so deep. I'll never be able to reclaim it. But,
yeah, that's okay. We had our moment, Abby. It was awesome.
It's beautiful.
Well, right. I have in Abby, we've still got a couple minutes till we officially begin. So I just figured we'd chat a couple minutes if that's okay with you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Well, and I have kind of a guilty admission or confession for you. And it's totally relevant. It's not just going to be rambling, though most of what I talk about is just rambling. I really don't read much young adult, and I was never really quite able to pinpoint why. When I was younger, I always was reading adult novels, and as I got older, I started to say, oh, I don't like all the mushy feelings, or I don't like all the romance, or all the love triangles. I really don't like love triangles. But when I read this just a few months ago, I actually realized why I didn't want to read those young adult books. And it wasn't because I didn't like the feelings or I didn't like the teen angst. It's because it felt too real to me. And it was kind of tapping into this stuff that still was locked up in there. And I didn't want it to come out. It actually made me uncomfortable reading about it and thinking about it. And so when I read Speak, first of all, I was a little scared going into this. I had posted a picture, silly social media, of just me holding this in my hand saying, hey, I'm getting ready to read this. And several people wrote me right away saying how they bawled the whole way through the book. And I was like, oh my God, is this going to hurt me? Is it going to kill me?
Yeah.
But it really, I feel like it broke something open inside me and made me realize that, okay, I've been purposely keeping this stuff walled off in my mind. And so for better or worse, you broke that dam open. So I guess I need to thank you for that because it was a pretty enlightening thing.
I'm really glad to hear that. But here's I'm certainly not a professional when it comes to any kind of discussions of mental health or anything, but I feel that it broke you open because you were ready. If you hadn't been ready and you just kind of read it because you were going to have this chat with me or whatever, you wouldn't, just because I think this is how our brains and our spirits work, it wouldn't have settled as deeply in you if you still had the walls up.
You might be right. And well, in 2020 and now 2021 here, they've been rough years for a lot of us. And I've had a considerable amount of mental health distress and my family as well. And so you might be right. I might just be at that point where, okay, this had to happen at this point in my life.
Right.
So yeah. Well, we are at our appointed time, so I should probably introduce things here. Hello, welcome back. It has been a long time. You haven't seen me in a long time, and you have found yourself in another Herrick District Library virtual author event. I'm very excited about it. And before we really get rolling, I've got to give some shout outs and some thank yous. first and foremost to the Herrick District Library. It's the library and their resources that make these events possible. And even though we are not at the library in the Hazel B. Hayes Auditorium, which is beautiful, I do miss going in there. They are exercising caution, and I commend them for that. So I think it's a really good thing that we're able to do these events online, and we're able to connect with authors that we might not have been able to in person, which is fabulous. It's a wonderful thing. So thank you so much, Herrick District Library, and our producer and everyone's favorite librarian, who is our Wizard of Oz tonight, behind the curtains, orchestrating everything, Abby Stroop. Abby really does all of the hard work for these, getting everything together, working with the libraries and the authors and with me, and I'm a pain in the butt. So Abby, you are amazing. Thank you so much. Next breakfast, I'm buying. You might have to get the half size, but that's okay. So, and who else did I want to give a shout out to? Spilling Ink. And you may be watching this on the Spilling Ink Facebook page right now. Spilling Ink is an author and publishing industry professionals, especially with indie authors, talk show. And we do a talk show and a podcast, and I've been with him for several years now, and it's really where I first learned anything about podcasting, and they are fantastic people. So if you're watching on their channel, make sure you subscribe to their channel. They are just wonderful people. But okay, I've been babbling long enough. I think that was like 3 minutes. It's got to be some kind of record here for me. We have a wonderful guest tonight that I'm super excited about. Laurie Halse Anderson. How are you?
I'm looking at myself the way you do on your Zoom screen, and I realized I didn't put enough sunscreen on my nose. But it matches my shirt in such a delightful way. I also want to show to the world, because I have to get all my pictures done now, because I'm decided to keep my COVID hair.
Oh, nice.
You can see exactly when it started, the pandemic. So, okay, now that I've gotten all my beauty stuff out of the way, it is a joy to be with you here. One of the things that has gotten me through the past year and a half is the ability to have virtual gatherings. And as somebody who used to spend a lot of time traveling all over the world, I love this. And I think it allows us to create much more compassion and equity in our library spaces or our educational spaces, because people can participate in virtual events much easier than physical events. So I really hope that when we get back to doing physical events, we always have this virtual piece, because I love them.
It is very cool. And I have to say, your hair grows really fast if that's your COVID hair.
Yeah, it does.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. I eat super healthy.
So Laurie, what was that sarcastic, or do you really eat super
No,
healthy?
I really do. It's annoying. Everybody in my family is annoyed by it. Yeah. I'm like, here, have some lettuce.
Yeah, I've actually got fresh lettuce growing outside right now, and I'm excited to dig into it.
Yeah, we could have lunch together, and we would be excited about our really good food.
Well, so Laurie, in case people are not already familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about the books you write?
Sure, let me do that. And at the same time, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to kind of weave my care and concern heads up.
Wonderful.
As I discuss my books.
Because I haven't done that already.
I have been writing for a while, and I write for a whole age range. I don't have any board books yet, but I'm working on it. Once I get some board books published, I will have people covered from birth to like 40. And we'll talk about why 40-year-olds are reading YA in a couple minutes. Right? So one group of readers knows me for my contemporary YA. My first novel, Speak, came out a long time ago, 20 odd years ago, and it was a very small book with no publicity budget, but then thanks to amazing librarians and educators, thank you very much, who just started to hand it to people who really enjoyed reading it and benefited from it. That's kind of gave me a big boost. Now here's where the care and concern discussion comes in, because everything I write for teens is based in the really hard stuff that teenagers go through in real life, even before the pandemic. That includes PTSD, that includes sexual violence, that includes eating disorders, parents who are struggling with their own issues, And so any discussion of my books are going to bring up some of those topics. I also write books for younger kids. I write historical fiction for middle school, high school kids set in American history, which also has a lot of trauma. So I'm a really cheerful person to talk to all the time. I have also done picture books and a series of books called Vet Volunteers that is not about trauma. It's about being like 9 years old and loving pets. And it's really a delight to take a break from the heavier stuff and write those books. So this is just to say that our conversation here today is going to touch on stuff that is deep and can be painful for some people. And everybody in the whole world doesn't have enough insulation on our emotional wires right now after this past year and a half. So you need to please everybody take care of yourself and listen to your body, listen to your emotional reactions. And feel free to, I guess, folks, if they have questions, can they put them in the chat or the Q&A? What would you prefer, Jay?
Oh, actually, that's a question for our producer, Abby.
Anywhere you want to put it, I will be able to find it, and then I will just jump right in like the Wizard of Oz.
Perfect.
There we go.
Just what
There
I
we
do.
go.
Excellent. Pay no attention to that woman behind the curtain.
That's right. But also, if you're joining us through Spilling Ink on Facebook, if you want to put up a question there, I will try to grab those as well.
Wow,
idea.
you are
Look at me
multitasking.
He is. Can I add one more thing, Jay? Because I forgot
Yeah.
to talk about the new cool things I've been doing the last couple of years.
Yeah.
In addition to kind of traditional format novels, I have come out with 2 graphic novels in the last few years. I did a graphic novel version of Speak, which was with the Canadian artist Emily Carroll. And man, we got to talk about that. And what came out most recently is I got to write a Wonder Woman graphic novel from scratch.
Oh, cool.
And that was just dream come true time. So also very heavy though. It's got, I don't know. I'm a Yankee, you know, I need to talk about what's hard.
I didn't know that was a Yankee thing.
I think, well, you weren't raised by my mother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ooh. A flinty woman.
Well, so and I haven't read any of your books for middle schoolers at all.
Mm-hmm.
I am familiar with your YA, but just from reading that, it feels like it's different from other YA fiction that I've read. Do you get that as well? I mean, do you feel like there's a little bit of a difference?
You know, I sometimes wonder if that's because I didn't study writing. I didn't study English. Didn't go to grad school. And I think sometimes, especially, I don't know, you would need somebody who is kind of a larger overview of the industry to make this. But so I just, I'm fairly unschooled in those things. So maybe that's why it sounds a little bit different.
Okay.
I'm glad you think it's better. Some people don't think it's better.
Well,
but,
yeah, well, maybe that's it. Maybe it's,
yeah.
maybe you're like the diamond in the rough or something like that. I don't know, but
It's it's interesting because, and also I'm sure we've got a couple of writers watching today. And so let me make sure I tell you why you should think carefully before you sign up for graduate school debt. Because, while there are amazing graduate school programs and there are amazing colleges and universities who have some great creative writing professors, I have heard so many stories from people who have, oh my goodness, they've gotten their hearts broken and their spirits crushed because they got in a program which either had professors who really shouldn't have been teaching people because the professors themselves were bitter, unpublished writers, or they're like $120,000 in debt because they went to graduate school. And that's, I get really angry when I hear that people feel, you know, that because I know what that weighs on them. And it takes about 10 years, I think, on average, from the time you start trying to break into writing before you can really get there. And so to have to carry that debt on your back for a decade, as well as trying to earn a living, that's tough. There are a lot more programs nowadays where you can attend workshops or go to like a summer seminar, find critique groups online that I think for people who are like normal human beings and weren't born with a trust fund, that they can explore. Nobody in publishing will ever ask you where you went to college or what degree you have. They don't care. All they care about is the quality of the manuscript.
And for those of you that have trust funds, we still love you. You go ahead and spend your money wherever you want it.
Oh,
But just
yeah.
remember, that's not what it's all about.
No. Yeah.
Well, I think that's good advice, because there are so many things now marketed to writers to try to get you to spend money to make you better at things. And honestly, I love workshop groups at libraries, things like that, where critique groups. I think that they're so valuable, especially if you get one that's really brutally honest and doesn't mind flaying you open. That's the best thing you could do right there.
Yeah. In my critique group, whenever we would, I'm not in one right now because we're all too busy right now, but when I was in one for a while, they were doing every couple of weeks. And when we would pass a manuscript around, the first question is, where are you with this? Because sometimes you've just written a chapter and you just want to know if you're like completely off the mark. So you just kind of need some gentle steering questions, or you're about to turn it into somebody, and that's when you want the red pencil treatment. And so being able to work with workshop partners or critique partners who are flexible enough in their own critiquing methods to know that there are different layers to that, that's really helpful.
Yeah. Well, and being able to communicate with people exactly what you need from a critique partner, I think that that's also a really important thing.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I want to talk to you a little bit about teenagers here. I have 4 children, and 3 of them are adults now. So I've been through the teenager thing many times. My last one is just now getting into their teen years. And I think that one of the most difficult things for a parent to do is to figure out how to connect with a teenager and how to really communicate with a teenager. And I think that that's something that teachers struggle with as well. And that, giant marketing companies are always trying to figure out, how to communicate with teens to get their message through. And you really created something that seems to be an amazing conduit for being able to connect with young people, when you wrote Speak. And it's been 20 some years, you said. But how do you feel about that fiction as a conduit for connecting with young adults? Do you think that's an effective way to communicate?
Yeah, I think it's in our DNA, and it's not just young adults. The reason that I think sometimes it can feel frustrating for adults to know if they're connecting with teenagers is that the teenage mind and body are going through so much in terms of hormones and really, really rapid brain development with this part of the brain, the front part, which allows you to plan for the future and understand long-term consequences. This is a very poor design element of the human brain. That's what develops last. Which is why I also have 4 kids, which is why teenagers who are like adult-sized people, but they've got kid-sized brains in them yet. And so that creates some frustration for everyone. But I do believe that storytelling is, and communicating through story and connecting through story is hardwired into the marrow of our bones. And I think that I would have been a really terrible mother if I had not become an author. Because I was really thinking back on who I was when the kids were little. I was like really set up to do what my parents did, which was, working class people with really big ambitions and not a lot of experience in them. And, you're going to get these grades, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, right? Because then that's going to make me, your mom, feel better about myself. And the greatest gift I've ever been given by the universe is the ability. I traveled around the country and spoke to millions of kids. And more importantly, I listened to them. And all these teenagers were so generous with me. And sometimes it's easier to talk to a complete stranger who's only going to be at your school for one day than it is to open up to the people that you live with or who care about you the most. But I really, they taught me what was important. And what's important, I think, is that we to recognize, the adults in at least American culture, that we are harming every generation of kids that comes through us. We were harmed when we were young, and we don't know better, so we're passing that along. We have these old messages that are based in patriarchy, that are based in power dynamics that are super unhealthy. And when our children are most vulnerable, because they have young minds in adult-sized bodies, then they're most vulnerable and most in need of healthy, loving, wonderful adults to connect with. They push back because they're confused. Using stories, though. Stories are how we connect. And not because, please don't do this, okay? Don't like say, go to your teenager as a well-meaning parent or adult in their life. Young person, this book is going to help you. I want you to read it, and then we'll have a conversation. No, because any kid worth their salt is going to throw that book out the car window,
Yeah.
or it's gonna go missing. No, but if you really want to connect with your children, that means that you have to open your ears and your eyes and close your mouth. Close your mouth and let them tell you what they're watching or what they're reading. Read what they're reading. Watch what they're watching, even though you want to rinse your eyeballs out afterwards.
Anime.
Oh, right? Closing, watch it. Closing. Right? Because it's easier to talk about the characters in anime. It's easier to talk about the characters in music videos, in stories, in graphic novels, when you are a teenager, because sometimes, or actually a lot of the time, you're not quite sure where you are. You're still learning, right? And teenagers have so much stuff being thrown their way. And they get hurt. They get really hurt. And when you're traumatized, which a lot of people have been through pretty profound traumas before they hit 18, and your brain is still developing, and now your brain is dealing with the consequences of that trauma, that makes it even harder. So I'm blathering. I'm a really good blatherer here. Let me summarize. Look to the bottom line on this one. Stories are the library for the soul that we all need to fill for ourselves, and model that behavior for our kids, and then create opportunities so that they can start choosing the stories that they want in the libraries of their soul.
Whoa. That was profound. That was good. And we were talking about profound statements earlier.
Yeah.
Abby, you've got some some big shoes to fill. No, and I love that. And I think that, because my wife and I are both in our early 40s now, and we're on our last kid, and we are trying so hard to not make all the stupid mistakes we did before, because when we're raising our kids, we're learning how to be parents and adults at the same time. But it's tough. It's so tough to just listen, because we have so many opinions, and most of them are well-meaning. Most of the time, we're not trying to put our child down or anything else, but we can still hurt them. And that was one of the hard things for me reading Speak, because I read this and bawled my eyes out, and I gave it to my wife, and she read it in a matter of hours, sitting on the back deck, bawling her eyes out, because we saw our youngest so much in this book. And it's hard to read something like this and to know that, okay, I'm screwing up. I don't quite know how I'm screwing up just yet, but we need to do something different. We need to figure some things out so that we can get them where they need to be. And that was a powerful thing. And I think you mentioned closer to the top of the hour, something about why are 40-year-olds reading YA, and of course when I picked this up, it was in preparation for us coming to talk, but I feel like it really changed some things in me, and I know in my wife as well. And then I had to wrestle this out of a friend's hand just a couple days ago, so I could have it with me to flash in front of the screen here. But she absolutely loves young adult. My friend Jen Rose, and I know, Jen, that you're watching or listening. She actually co-starred here when we had Ellen Hopkins on last year,
Oh,
because I was
fun.
her favorite author. And so I'm curious as to why you think people our age are reading young adult, besides the fact that we just want to cry.
Yeah, yeah. Before I lose track of this one thought though, I think, for you and your wife and anybody else out there who's trying to help teens grow in a healthy way right now. And boy, the horrors of middle age just never seem to end, right? Your kids are getting zits and you're getting zits on your wrinkles at the same time, right?
Good
And
stuff.
everyone's learning and growing and messing up and feeling bad about that. But look, all kids are going to struggle. That's part of human nature. There's all the great philosophies are, why do we struggle? And the best thing that the family unit or the unit of love that surrounds that kid can do when a kid is going through a struggle is to acknowledge that it's there in a way that feels safe for the kid, and help them figure out the steps that they need to learn, because they're going to be struggling for their whole life. Everybody does. To be human is to mess up. To be human is to be hurt, sometimes by people who really want to damage you. Sometimes bad things happen to great people. The goal is not to raise a kid who graduates from high school never having been in pain. The goal is to help your child before they go on to their next part of their life, independent from your life, is to help them build their own toolbox for dealing with painful and hard situations. And those tools hopefully will continue to grow and be refined as they get older. As we get older, all my kids are adults now, and they're all having kids of their own, but my husband, my first husband, we're all learning things at this age that we can share when our kids feel like listening, or if they want to talk about it, that for the next 20 years. So it's, you're doing a good job.
Well, you talked about the toolbox, and I love that. And I think that what this book in particular did for me, what it added to the toolbox for me, was that I don't know it all, and I need to be open to change and to trying different things. And I think that was, I mean, already it's only been a couple months, but we've had a good response from that. We've decided, okay, well, let's talk to some people who really know what they're doing, talk to some professionals, and I think that's been good. And that's something 20 some years later, speak, you're
Right.
still helping. And I can't get over how amazing that is. I mean, it's just I don't know, it's just a really good thing. Abby, I told you I was going to cry tonight.
There we go.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
You did. And actually, while Jay pulls himself together, I'm just gonna just take a moment here and ask, because parent of a 12-year-old here, who is listening to you talk about parenting, and when are you gonna write a parenting book, Laurie? Can you do that for me? Because I'm gonna need all the help I can get.
I think we need to do it for each other. It's one of the joys, I think, of social media, although there's a lot of stuff that's not very joyful, but to be able to connect with people. And there's some brilliant TikToks out there, just these, and like I would never probably have found, or I wouldn't have found her as early as I did, people like Brene Brown, and who writes amazing books and has just that. I have like a whole Brene Brown section in my parenting my parenting toolbox. I don't need to write a parenting book. Just read one or two of my novels, and hopefully that'll help you. But I have to tell you, Jay, why 40-year-olds like YA.
Oh yeah, I forgot my question.
Okay, you forgot. I see we're going to get there. This needs to be an 8-hour conversation. I think it's because so like almost nobody gets through their adolescence, and adolescence I think really ends closer to 22, without some kind of scars, right? But the way life is that you buckle it down and you carry on, because you gotta get your education if you have that, or you've got to figure out your job, and then you've got to figure out who your people are, and you don't know how to deal with this hard thing, so you just kind of put it down. But YA literature, first of all, some of it's really, really fun. I don't write that stuff, but other people do. But it gives a lot of adults the opportunity to revisit a part of their adolescence that has been, when we don't deal with our pain, it keeps pulsing like an injury, right? And sometimes you can ignore it, but if you come around into another hard thing or another traumatic moment of your life, and you have untreated pain from your adolescence, it goes, right? And so I think a lot of people, and I put myself in this when I read some YA books that really touch all the feels that are still kind of ouchy for me. Now at this age, I can go back to who I was at 15, at 13, and first of all, love myself so much more and forgive myself, and kind of process some things that I've been avoiding. When I was raped when I was 13, and just a few weeks before ninth grade started, and it was a super traumatic time in my family's life. My dad had PTSD from World War II. He was so alcoholic that he had been kicked out of the church. He was a Methodist minister, and he was very suicidal. My mother was holding all of us together, totally broke, and it was a nightmare. And then I was sexually attacked, and I didn't tell anybody because I couldn't find the words in this tornado of our house, because I thought it would make everything worse. And so I didn't tell anybody until 25 years later that I finally got some therapy and finally started to deal with the pain that I was in. Now, I wrote a couple of years ago a memoir, a memoir called Shout, and it's written in poetic form because I'm so angry still about how bad we are in the United States at talking about healthy consent-based sexuality. It's like, why can't we figure this out right now? It's not that hard, right? You keep your pants on, you keep your hands to yourself until you have a sober conversation with a person that you want to touch. But we still need to have some conversations about this, clearly. And I found something changed for me when I wrote that book. Because when I was writing Speak, I wasn't going to tell anybody what I had been through. That I could barely tell myself. I could barely tell my therapist or my husband. So I fictionalized Speak. Speak is not, the events in Speak were not the events of my life. The emotional truth of my life when I was 13 is in Speak. But by the time I sat down to write Shout, another 20 years had passed, and I've grown. I've been very fortunate because I've had lots of opportunities to grow. And what I found myself doing when I wrote Shout is I listened to the music of my adolescence. And I had not been able to do that for a very long time. I could listen to one or two songs, but the albums that I played on repeat when I was in high school, I couldn't listen to more than two songs because it would have just all the bad stuff would clutter into my throat again. And so for me, writing this as well as reading it as a middle-aged person really, really freed me from the trauma and pain of my teenage years. And now I can listen to that music.
Wow. And so, well, and this is for the writers that are out there listening on Spilling Ink. So you were actually able to connect with younger Laurie through this music. That's incredible.
Absolutely.
And I know the subject matter is terrible, but I think it's incredible how you made that connection and were able to follow it like that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, well, I guess we're getting into the deeper stuff now.
We didn't even go into the shallow water, honey. We just dove off into 10 feet. It's great. Life is short. We got to live it fast.
You're absolutely right. Well, yes, I definitely want to talk about it. Do you feel like, oftentimes when we talk about representation, many times we're talking about marginalized groups, people of color, LGBTQ people, especially trans people, people that have been oppressed by society for many, many, many years, intentionally, systemically. But I think that one thing that doesn't always get talked about is how important representation for mental illness, for people who are survivors of sexual assault and other assaults. Is that something in your experience that has been pretty important with what you do?
Yeah, but I have to be really clear about this. I think as a white, cis, hetero woman, I've gotten a lot of latitude.
Yeah. We have privilege.
Yep, absolutely. And I think what I would love to see happen, and you're beginning to see it a little bit, we need to do it. This is where libraries can really do important work, especially libraries who have a lot of people who fit in my identity group. And so for them to read outside their own identity group, even if it's somebody, for example, who's a victim of sexual violence, but to read about the experience of somebody who didn't look or didn't have their life like them, that's really important. We have to learn, especially people who come from the advantages that whiteness brings. We have to learn to enter into the intersections, right? And to listen to the people who occupy intersectional spaces. There's one of my favorite writers and a good friend of mine is an author named Tiffany D. Jackson. And she wrote a YA novel called Grown, Grown. She's a Black woman. And so that's if you like to speak, you need to read Grown too. And you need to read, Kelly Yang came out with a book. It was a little bit based on some events that she experienced at an Ivy League school. And I think it's called, you have to look this up for me, librarian, Parachutes, something with parachutes in it. So what, do you know it, Abby?
She said she's on it.
Okay, good. You have to have like your emergency backup librarian.
I say maybe Abby, if you could make note of those, and then we can highlight those later on for people.
Yeah, and make a list. Put together a list. I had one of those going for a while of different stories that examine survivors of sexual violence through different lenses. And we always have to talk about people who are male, who identify as male when we're talking about the victims of sexual violence. We don't often think about men as being a marginalized group, but they are too often excluded from the conversation and excluded from spaces where they feel safe enough to talk about the violence that they've experienced sexually, which is overwhelmingly also at the hands of men. Although there are certainly women and people who identify as female who can be sexual predators.
Well, and I think I read also that men or boys are much less likely to report any type of sexual assault.
So, it's so hard for them. I mean, Parachutes, thank you. It's just Parachutes. I got it, by Kelly Yang. She also writes a lot of great books for middle school students. There's an organization for men, maybe Kelly, you could write this down in the chat, the link. It's called 1 in 6. It's the number 1 and then IN number 6.org. Because 1 in 6 is the estimate of men who have been victimized, not always by profound rape but unwanted touching, unwanted sexual interactions. And I think this is part of the heteronormative garbage that fills our spaces, that especially for boys who are young and they're still getting to know themselves as a sexual human being, they get really confused. And then if they're hearing conversations that have hatred or disdain for people who are LGBTQ, they're just like, oh my gosh, what happened to me? And we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
We have a lot of work to do.
We have a ton of work to do. I host another podcast that's called Unafraid, and it's all about the queer life experience. And we have a lot of very difficult, tearful conversations on there too, but also a lot of very angry conversations because we are not doing enough.
No.
But yeah, boy, I can't even remember where we were at. You got going, and I'm totally lost, and I'm like, holy cow, how do I get back to where we were? So you may have better numbers than I do. Oh, thank you for posting that, Abby. But when I looked up sexual assault numbers in America, we were somewhere in the 400s of thousands. Does that sound about right?
You're talking about annually?
Yeah, yeah.
It's I haven't seen the recent numbers. The best place to go for statistics about victims and perpetrators of sexual violence is RAINN, RAINN.org, two N's.
Okay.
That's the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. It was founded about 25 years ago, largely because of Tori Amos, who's an amazing person, also
No
a
kidding.
survivor of sexual violence. And so RAINN is, first of all, it's got a wonderful hotline. It has hotlines that are anonymous chats, anonymous phone call, trained people respond to it. Every high school needs to have RAINN's information in every single bathroom, inside the stalls, over the urinals, because kids need to see it in a place where they can snap a picture of their phone and then they can make a call anonymously. They also have a part on their website is for people who have a friend who's been hurt with sexual abuse or violence and they don't know how to react. Like, how do I help my friend?
Okay.
So that's really, really important stuff. They also have tremendously good statistics. Almost all their statistics come from the Department of Justice. If you have groups of people with lots of energy and rage, which is really very energizing, who want to try to help make this better, one of the things that they do is that they along with a couple of other organizations, raise money to get backlogged raped kits tested, because there are hundreds of thousands of untested rape kits around the country. They also work with policymakers, police departments, so to help law enforcement become better at listening to victims when they've been sexually assaulted. DAs, state law, people who develop policies and laws to make it so that more people will feel comfortable coming forward. Because it's a highly, highly unreported crime.
And I think that RAINN is also an organization that people can donate to, correct?
Oh, please donate
Yes.
to them.
I think my favorite podcast is My Favorite Murder, and I know they talk about donating to RAINN every now and again. So
that's important.
very important. And with all of these reported sexual assaults, I know that those numbers are really misleading because so much doesn't get reported.
Right.
And so what I wanted to ask you, and this isn't necessarily directly because of Speak, but I think it's very common. I wanted to ask you about silence. You said that your first instinct, after you had been raped, was just to not tell anyone.
Yep.
And you didn't for many, many years. And I think that
Yep.
that's the case for so many people.
Yep.
Why is it that silence is the go-to, do you think? Why do you think that happens?
Well, a lot of the people who hold power and who have traditionally held power think that they should be able to touch people's bodies without permission, and they don't have any incentive to change the laws or the attitude or the culture. There are some faith communities that traditionally, although different organizations are looking at this too, who have traditionally blamed, and I'm speaking in very general terms here. I'm going to talk about women as victims, but again, let's remember everybody is victimized, and transsexual people, transgender people have the highest amount of sexual violence perpetrated upon them in colleges from any group. So, but traditionally, the victims of sexual violence are shamed and blamed. You were wearing those clothing, you had that drink, you went out with them, you were making out with them, so it's your fault. Now, it's interesting, when people get mugged and they get bashed in the head with a brick so that the person can lift their wallet, the bad guy can lift we never say, well, why did you wear those pants? Because it's really easy to get your wallet out of that back pocket, you idiot. I think you kind of wanted, you want some attention. This is why, that's the kind of stuff. When I was a journalist years ago, just before I wrote Speak, I wrote for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And I had to cover a court case in which a young woman had not just been raped, but it was such a horrific assault that there were kidnapping charges because she had been held for hours and hours and hours and hours. And this is what Twice in my life, I've seen red, you know, where you get to that place where your rage just tips over into a place that's very primal. And it happened to me in that courtroom when the defense attorney attacked this young woman on the stand and with all those lines. And why did you go home with him? I just, you know, and that's the closest I've ever come to publicly assaulting somebody.
Wow.
So this, we have to understand there's a very, very deep, hundreds and hundreds and thousands probably of years of culture that have to do with this. And we have the power to change it in one generation. We can change this in one generation because, you know, and I've heard from not just victims who are 15. I've been contacted by 80-year-olds who were sexually assaulted when they were kids, and they've carried this with them. So it's not that this is a teen problem. This is a human problem. And so we're culturally polarized right now, but maybe one of the ways we can build some bridges between people on different sides of political aisles is to start with some basic building blocks, that nobody gets to touch your body without your permission, right? And that this is what permission looks like. I had this great school visit in New Jersey a couple of years ago. I was talking to a group of 11th graders, and we were talking about pornography, as the way you do, right? If you're talking to a group of 11th graders.
Of course.
Yeah. And so and they were doing a lot of the talking, but I was trying to bring home the message of consent. And this young man raises his hand and he goes, "Okay, miss, I get it. We got to ask. You can't get consent from somebody who's high or drunk. You have to get permission, and then it has to be ongoing permission, and that your partner can change he really heard everything I was saying. I was super proud of him. And then he was really an 11th grader with the next thing that came out of his mouth, because he said, "But miss, in porn, nobody ever asks permission. It all just kind of flows." And that's exactly what he did with his shoulders. It flows.
He's going to be going into theater someday.
You know, I was dying. And I said, "Dude, it's a movie set. There's a camera, there's a script, there's some annoying person yelling out what they're supposed to do next."
I've been fortunate enough to have several sex workers on my other podcast, and they work in porn, and they both independently made the point of, remember that porn isn't actually sex. It's just acting, you know.
Right.
That's all it is. But I think that young people see this and have this unrealistic expectation of it.
And this is something we really have to have. It makes these conversations even more important, because parents have not overnight gotten better at explaining human sexuality and consent-based sexuality to their kids.
Oh.
But what has happened in the last 10 years is that usually, from the estimates, the professional estimates I've read, kids are beginning to see pornography between the ages of 9 and 10. And they're seeing it on their phones or their friends' phones. And they're seeing the free stuff. And from what I understand, a lot of the free stuff is not produced ethically. Mm. So they're seeing a lot of pornography that has a lot of violence associated with it. And I've talked to emergency room doctors who tell me stories of a young couple who had, you know, a really strong emotional bond, and then they decided, okay, now we're ready, we're going to have sex, and this is what they thought it looked like. And then one of them gets hurt to a degree that they have to go to an emergency room. And that's a really horrible thing to think about. It's an even much more horrible thing to experience, or to have somebody that you love experience that. So we grown-ups, this is, even though I write YA, I was secretly hoping that Shout would become like a really good book club for adult book clubs. Because I think as adults, we don't have a lot of practice talking about these things, except for me. And how can we talk to our kids about these things when we can't even talk to other adults about them?
Well, and I have an idea here, and I think that a lot of it ties right into shame. I think that shame plays a big part in this. But I am definitely not an expert, and I haven't talked to kids like you have, but I mean, I would think that there's a certain amount of shame that keeps people from talking about things like this.
And the best way I know of to clear the shame out of the air, out of the room, is to be honest. I was actually, I think I was in the Midwest a couple of years ago, and I was speaking to a group, and a young woman pulled me aside afterwards, and she had been sexually assaulted repeatedly by an uncle. And when she read Speak, because he started when she was about 10 and she read Speak when she was 12, that's when she realized that this was wrong. And it was that that there was a reason that he was saying, don't tell. And so her parents really handled it very well. Their police department handled it very, very well. But until she came to my presentation, she had never heard of another person. She had never heard that anybody else on the whole planet had gone through that. And so she thought, what is wrong with me? What kind of monster am I that I'm the person this happened to? And when we can become more open, and I do think this is changing a little bit, and say, yep, this happened to me. It was horrible. It sucked. I was depressed. I drank too much. I got high for a year. I've had a hard time learning how to trust people. Whatever kinds of things you come to the table with because of something hard that you've been through. When you can be honest about your experience, first of all, it's healthier for you. Second of all, you are showing the kids in your life what it looks like to be a survivor. And everyone's going to have to survive something. So the shame goes away when we open our mouths.
Okay. Well, and I think that my wife and I have been very fortunate, and I don't think it's because of any amazing parenting we've done, but our kids are not afraid to talk to us about anything that's happened. And
Good.
I won't, because I don't have their permission, I won't get into any
Right.
specific instances, but all of my kids have been through something that, thank God, they told us about right away, and we were able
Yeah.
to do what we could. But
Right.
I think it's certainly not the case in every household.
No.
In some households, it's not safe for kids to come to someone, because maybe
Right.
that someone is the it that we learn about in Speak, and I think the it can probably be something different from a lot of people, for a lot of people.
One of the most painful things about the pandemic, aside from the disease part and the death and the pain that directly brought to people, is that the number of callers younger than age 18 calling into or contacting RAINN went through the roof.
Mm.
Because for kids who are experiencing sexual violence or any kind of violence at home, school is their safe place. And if during the lockdown, if you lived in a part of the country that was in lockdown, you were locked down with the person who was abusing you, sometimes for months.
Yeah, it's not nice to think about, is it?
No, but it, flip it and let's use that as an opportunity to drive home how important it is for kids to have access to books, how important it is that every community deserves and needs to have a library. Every school needs to have not only a library, but a full-time certified librarian and the support staff that they need, so that they can help the educators in the building, but also be able to provide kids with some safe spaces and the kind of books that they need to help them develop their toolbox and take charge of some things.
And we are certainly not going to get into politics, Abby. I promise you that. I've made this promise several times. But when you said safe spaces, that's one of the things that really irks me, is that when people make fun of safe spaces. Oh, you need a safe space, and I'm just like, you know what? You have no idea what someone's going through in their life. We definitely need our safe spaces.
I actually think that people who come with that aggressive attitude are probably themselves have some pain, and they have no idea how to begin to confront it.
Yeah. Well, you're giving them you're giving them more compassion than I typically do. So
That's good. We need lots of different responses to
we
build
do.
a healthy community. That's cool.
Well, so we've been talking about some really heavy stuff, and I'm certainly not trying to sell anybody this book. Speak. Let's see here. The breaking novels that changed it all, that changed everything. But I thought it was wonderful that you told a rather, I mean, it was kind of a heartbreaking story. I won't lie, but you told it in a way without showing graphic violence or graphic rape, and I really appreciated that, because I've been emotionally, I've been not in the best space the last 18 months or so, and I don't know that I could have handled that.
Yeah.
But it was still just as effective, and I think that's wonderful. And I think that for all the authors watching, many of you I'm sure have read this book, but that's a really good lesson, especially if you're writing young adult, that you don't necessarily have to be that graphic if you write it right.
And it's important to remember to be true to the point of view of your character. If your character is a 13-year-old who has no sexual experience whatsoever and has had a couple of beers for the first time in her life, she's not going to be able to report in graphic detail. And even if she had been completely sober, even if she had been 35 years old and had appropriate, healthy sexual behavior, the trauma of a physical assault, we have three responses to trauma. It's freeze, flee, or fight. Sometimes it's all three. But every one of those is a legitimate response to a traumatic experience, because your body's job is to survive the experience. And I will say that in early drafts of Speak, before I started to show it to editors, I had a much more graphic description. And then I realized that that book is told through her voice. That is a very, probably, I think all first-person narrators are unreliable to the reader, but they're very reliable to themselves. They're reporting to themselves on how the world looks and feels to them in that moment. And that's how she would experience it. That's how she would tell herself about it. After you've had the book, several months of the book where she's really working very hard not to look at what happened. Because that's also another way of that you survive. You asked me earlier, oops, I'm getting all excited, I'm pulling out my earphones. You asked me earlier about silence. And I think that that's an important thing to also lend some legitimacy to. Because if you've been the victim of a trauma and you don't want to talk about it, if you just need to be silent for a while, then you are the best judge of what is healthy and safe for you. If it's not safe for you to speak up, then you don't have to. But I hope that if, as we grow as a culture, please, can we start growing as a culture? We can get to the place where people will have people in their lives they can turn to and won't have the shame and will feel like I can talk about this. I'm not sure if I answered your last question.
No, you did, and you remind me of something that actually happened a few months back, on the Spilling Ink talk show. There was a guest that came on who was a therapist and written a book about PTSD for soldiers, and it turned into a very, very intense conversation that all of a sudden, 40 minutes in, I couldn't do anymore. And I kind of freaked out. I was like, oh, I've got to log off of this and let the other host take over. And I'm sure anyone who's watching this, sorry guys, sorry that I did that, but it was it just became too much. It started pulling up things that I wasn't ready to deal with, and had to make an emergency call to my own therapist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, something's happening, something's really wrong here. But yeah, I think that we need to be you can't push anyone to talk about something they're not ready to talk about. And
That's
I
true.
don't think you can push yourself to do that either. Like you said, you're going to be the best judge of when's the right time for you. Yeah. Boy, I kind of
And to bring this back to the books.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, please do.
yeah. And this is why I think YA as a genre has got some weird boundaries on it that were probably made by committees, and we all know how well committees work. But I think that books that are told through an intense adolescent lens are, you know, somehow we've labeled them YA, but clearly adults are getting a lot out of those as well. And maybe it's because, you know, because of the way our neurology develops in adolescence. That's why you experience things at such a loud volume. Your feelings are very loud, right? And then you learn to modulate that as you go into adulthood. And I think that reading adolescent experiences as an adult, you know, that's a whole other experience, and it's a super healthy one. It could be really, really lovely and wonderful and healing for the adult. I think it helps adults become better parents and aunts and uncles, better adults to the younger people in their lives. But yeah, books are the best, right?
They really are. Books are the best. What do you think?
Oh, can I recommend, before, I know we're running out of time, but I want to recommend a couple more books.
Yeah, recommend
Okay.
away.
All right, Abby, come on me. So we just came out with a 20th anniversary edition of Speak that came out, what would that have been? 2019. Good gracious. I seriously, it's still March 2020 in my head. And the 20th anniversary edition is two things I want to draw your attention to. One is it's got a wonderful introduction by Ashley Ford. Oh, what's Ashley's middle initial? Ashley Ford, Ashley, who just came out with her memoir. It's called Somebody's Daughter.
Ashley C. Ford.
Ashley C. Ford, thank you. Everybody needs to read Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. It's an adult book written as an adult memoir. Thank you very much. Abby's got it in the chat. And so she wrote the intro to Speak. She's an incredible, incredible writer and interviewer her. And I can't wait to see what she does next. And also in that 20th anniversary edition, my friend Jason Reynolds, who's just one of the best writers to pop up in children's lit in the last 50 years, he wrote an afterword. And it starts out, Dear Young Brother. And he wrote an afterword to boys and about males, adolescent experiences with females. And it's just, it'll open up your brain. It's a sign. You should also read everything that Jason writes.
That's a really important conversation to have right there.
Yep. Yippers. Yeah.
Well, librarian Abby, how are we doing? Do you have any more last minute questions?
I'm actually perfectly happy to keep going. What else do you recommend, Laurie? I would love to get, I always want book recommendations, especially from the people whose books I love. So talk to me.
Well, I'm doing a kind of a secret book right now about Abigail Adams. So I'm deep in the 18th century, which you probably don't want to be reading right now. Although, man, I found some good stuff. Whoa. Primary sources are my jam right now. I'm on Goodreads. So if you want to see what I'm reading for fun, you can go to my Goodreads and see that. I tend to read, like when outside of work, I tend to read a lot of adult mysteries. So those are good. And I've recently found some new adult mystery authors that I've enjoyed. I'm reading Hamnet, Hamnet, by Maggie O'Farrell right now. I just started it. Oh my gosh, the writing is so good. It's set in, Hamnet was a real person. He was William Shakespeare's son. And so it's about that time period and that family. And it's astoundingly good. I mean, it's just like every once in a while you pick up a book and you're just like, I want to underline every sentence. I can't wait to go back and reread it, because when I read a book for fun, I just want I read it for story first. Yeah. And usually, you know, it's kind of an occupational hazard. I go, oh man, you just kind of messed up that paragraph, you know, or that dialogue is going on way too, you know, I start analyzing it and and then I hate myself for doing that. But when I read a book that just pulls me in, I wind up reading it several times, because I get to the end of the book and I'm like, how did they do that? That was astounding. And I've been on the waiting list at my library for Hamnet for like 4 months. And every week I would check and I could see my number going up and up and up in the holds. And it was so exciting. It was so exciting.
I guarantee Abby is buying that book right now as we speak.
I mean, I don't want to say I'm on bookshop.org right now, but I think if you look in the list of links there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are at our time for
We
tonight.
are,
So, and
sadly.
Laurie, you've been amazing to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, this was delightful. I used to be on the road a lot,
Mhm.
and I'm not. And I like being at home because I really like writing books. That's why I got into this gig in the first place. But I do miss connecting hearts, and I feel like I've been connecting hearts with you guys this hour. So thank you for
That's
that.
awesome. I love it. Well, thank you.
Lori. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Well,
All
thank you
right.
for everyone else out there watching. Thank you,
All
Laurie.
right.
Thank you, Facebook land. We will talk to you all soon.
All right. Be safe.
Bye.